The first time she passed me on the ridge road, I almost missed a step because nobody passed me on that climb. I had lived in that town for 11 months by then, long enough to make my life small on purpose. Up at 5:20, coffee black, run by 6 o'clock, work calls by 8:30, protein, water, sleep, repeat. I had built the whole thing like a clean machine after my divorce. No chaos, no late nights, no pointless conversations, no room for anybody to come in and move the furniture around in my head. At 52, I was still built well enough that people assumed I took aging personally. I had spent years running an engineering firm, years on sites, years lifting, hauling, solving problems the direct way. Even after I sold most of the business and shifted to consulting from home, I kept the same basic religion. Discipline first, feelings later, usually much later. That morning I was halfway through my usual route, grinding up the steep stretch above the lake, when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick ones. Light, steady, annoying. Then a voice said, right near my shoulder, "You know, for a man with calves like that, this pace is weirdly conservative." Before I could answer, she moved past me. 40-something, maybe close to my age, dark ponytail, visor, long stride, shoulders set like she knew exactly what her body could do. She did not look back right away. That was the part that bothered me most. She passed me like she had expected to. I pushed harder and got up beside her near the guardrail. "You always talk this much uphill?" I asked. She glanced over, barely breathing hard. "Only when the company is disappointing." That was our first conversation. She beat me to the overlook by 6 seconds. I counted because of course I did. She bent over, hands on knees once, then straightened and smiled at me like we had just shared a joke I had not agreed to. "Not bad," she said. "Your form says retired college athlete. Your face says recently audited." "I live here," I said. "This is my route." She nodded like that meant nothing. "Great. Then you can show me where the real climb is tomorrow." I should have told her no. Instead I said, "Only if you can keep up when you stop talking." That was how it started. 2 days later I saw her again at the public tennis courts arguing with a guy in a visor about court rotation. Not loud, not rude, just efficient. She had one hand on her racket, one hip turned, and the poor man was already losing before he understood he was in a match. When she noticed me by the fence, she pointed with the racket. "Runner tax auditor." "Court thief," I said. She laughed. "So you do have a personality." Her name was Maya. She had moved into the townhouse next to mine 3 weeks earlier. I had noticed the bike rack on the back of her SUV, the moving boxes, the sudden appearance of bright running shoes outside the door next to mine. I had not planned to learn anything else. That plan lasted maybe 4 more days. I kept seeing her everywhere. At the trailhead at dawn. At the small market buying fruit and sparkling water like she was provisioning for a campaign. At the bike shop telling the owner his saddle recommendations were based on lies and male delusion. At the lake dock, where she was toweling off after an open water swim while I stood there holding coffee and wondering why my normal route through town now felt crowded with one person. She worked in race and wellness events, or something close to that. She seemed to know every organizer, volunteer, coach, and loud idiot with compression socks in a 50-mile radius. I told myself that was exactly the kind of person I avoided. Then I found myself signing up for a local charity trail run I had no interest in doing because she was doing it and had said, in front of 3 other people, "You look like a man who enjoys individual suffering but gets nervous around bib numbers." The morning of the run, she jogged up beside me at the start line wearing a black cap and that same expression she always had when she was about to make trouble. "You showed up," she said. "You talk like I lose dares." She leaned in a little. "I talk like you hate being predictable more than you hate me." That irritated me because it was close enough to true. We spent the first 4 miles trading places on narrow trail, passing each other whenever the path widened, taking little shots whenever one of us slipped on loose gravel or came out of a turn too wide. It should have been stupid. It was stupid. It was also the most fun I had had in a very long time, which I realized around mile 5 and immediately resented. She finished 23 seconds ahead of me and waited at the line with 2 bottles of water. "I bought you the cheap one," she said. "Generous. You'll earn the good one eventually." After that we stopped pretending our collisions were random. If she saw me rolling my bike out at sunrise, she asked where I was headed. If I saw her at the courts, I stayed. If one of us mentioned an event, the other somehow ended up there. A week later, the town announced sign-ups for the Coast Ridge Challenge, a brutal 2-day team event in late summer. Trail sections, road cycling, kayak transition, hill finish. The kind of thing normal people discussed for 10 minutes and rejected for sensible reasons. We were standing near the registration tent after a mixed doubles fundraiser, both sweaty, both annoyed because we had lost to a married pair who communicated in hand signals and passive aggression. Maya scanned the event poster and said, "You'd be good at this. I'd survive it." She looked at me. That sounded lonely. I shrugged. "You got somebody in mind for your team?" She took one step closer, close enough that I could see the tiny crease near her left eye from the sun. "I do now." I should have laughed it off. I should have said no. I should have gone home, made dinner, stretched, slept, and kept my nice sealed life intact. Instead, I took the registration pen out of her hand and wrote my name next to hers. She smiled without looking down at the form. There he is. That was the moment it stopped being a rivalry and became a problem. Once we signed up for the Coast Ridge Challenge, she started acting like we had entered a blood oath. My phone lit up that same night with a message from an unknown number. 6:14 p.m. Bring your bike tomorrow. And don't show up with those sad tire pressures again. Maya. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I smiled at my phone like an idiot, which my daughter Emma caught on a video call 10 minutes later. "Why do you look guilty?" she asked. "I don't look guilty. You look exactly like a man hiding either a bad purchase or a bad decision." "Neither." She narrowed her eyes. "You bought race gear, didn't you?" I changed the subject badly, which told her everything. The next morning, Maya had me climbing fire roads before sunrise with a pace that felt personal. She rode half a wheel ahead, talking over her shoulder like oxygen was free. "You're strong," she said. "But you ride like a guy who still believes suffering is a strategy." "It usually is." That explains a lot. She was impossible to train with and weirdly easy to keep following. Every session turned into a contest. Hill repeats became arguments. Recovery breakfasts turned into postmortems. If I beat her to a checkpoint, she claimed I cut corners. If she beat me, she called it character development for me. Then things started going wrong in ways that kept us stuck together. First, my chain snapped 12 miles outside town on a windy back road where cell service barely existed. I got off the bike, looked at the mess, and said one word at normal volume that carried more emotion than I intended. Maya rolled to a stop, took one glance, and said, "Nice." Very mechanical. Very masculine. I maintained this bike. Clearly. She crouched next to me, hands already moving. She had a small toolkit in her saddlebag that made mine look like a child's school project. We spent 20 minutes on the shoulder with grease on our fingers and trucks blowing past, while she insulted my maintenance routine, and I told her people skills were a rumor. At one point our hands bumped on the chain link, and neither of us moved right away. She looked up at me. "You always this fun when stranded?" "Only with qualified witnesses." That half-second sat between us longer than it should have. Then she went back to work. A week later we did a practice weekend on the coast, because she said we needed terrain honesty. That should have warned me. The whole trip went sideways fast. The motel had lost our booking. The only rooms left were two tiny ones above a bar that smelled like old fryer oil and wet carpet. Then it rained hard enough to turn the trail section into slick clay. "We should still run it," she said, tying back her hair. "Of course you'd say that." She looked at me. "You love this." "I hate every part of this." "You're standing here excited." She was right again, which was getting old. We took a wrong turn 3 miles in because neither of us wanted to admit the other had been right about the junction. By the time we figured it out, we were soaked, muddy, and laughing harder than either of us wanted to admit. On the way back down, we found a younger guy from another training group sitting on a rock with a cramped calf and a face full of panic. Maya was beside him immediately, calm and direct, talking him through water, breathing, stretching, the whole thing. I stayed and helped get his bike back to the road. Watching her then did something to me that had nothing to do with competition. She was still sharp, still fast, still impossible, but there was no performance in it. Just competence. Warmth without fuss. That night, we ended up eating overcooked chicken in the motel restaurant because everything else in town had closed early. She had one knee pulled up in the booth, hoodie on, hair still damp from a shower, and for the first time since I'd met her, she wasn't moving like she was about to launch into something. "Your marriage end quietly?" she asked. I looked up. "That direct, huh?" You can lie if you want. But I'm stuck in this terrible place with you, so at least make it interesting. I cut into the chicken, bought myself a second. Quietly, yeah? Too quietly. That was the problem. We got good at functioning and bad at saying what was true. By the time we admitted it, the whole thing had already been gone a while. She nodded like she understood that kind of silence too well. My version was louder, she said. More stupid, more back and forth. Lots of charm, lots of promises, lots of making me feel like maybe I was crazy for remembering what actually happened. I didn't interrupt. She looked out the rain-streaked window. You ever spend enough time with the wrong person that you start doubting your own first reaction to things? Yes, I said, and meant more than marriage when I said it. She turned back to me then, and something had shifted. Not softer exactly. More honest. Good, she said. I'd hate to be the only one here with bad judgment history. Back in the parking lot, the rain had slowed to a mist. We stood between our doors, not saying goodnight, not moving. You were good today, she said. On the trail. With the kid. With me. In general. That almost sounded sincere. She smiled. Don't ruin it. I should have gone into my room then. Instead, I stepped closer. She didn't back up. The kiss wasn't dramatic. That was what made it hit harder. No big speech, no build-up, just two tired people in damp clothes outside a bad motel finally stopping the nonsense for one honest second. Her hand landed flat against my chest. Mine found her waist. It was brief and not brief at all. When we pulled apart, she looked at me with that same competitive light. Only now it had something warmer under it. Well, she said quietly, that complicates training. I let out a breath. You started this. Absolutely, she said. And I'm not sorry. Neither was I. That was the part that kept me awake half the night. Not the kiss itself. The fact that for the first time in years, I was looking forward to morning for a reason that had nothing to do with discipline. After the coast weekend, something changed in my house before anything changed between us. I started missing things. Not meetings, not deadlines, not invoices. I still handled work. But I left a clean fork in the fridge and the yogurt in the drawer where the forks went. I stood in the garage one morning holding a floor pump and my car keys and had no idea why I was holding both. I checked my phone too often. I smiled for no reason. Emma noticed all of it. She came up for the weekend and stood in my kitchen watching me portion oats into containers like I was running a low-security prison. Okay, she said, this is getting weird. What is? You have energy. I always have energy. She leaned against the counter. No, you used to have discipline. Now you have energy. That's worse. I gave her a look. She grinned. So what's her name? I should have denied it. Instead, I opened the fridge, realized I was holding the pepper grinder, and shut it again. Emma started laughing. Oh, this is serious. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the counter. Maya. Emma saw the name. Maya. Nice. Athletic name. Dangerous. I picked up the phone. You're enjoying this too much. I spent 5 years thinking you were emotionally retired. This is excellent. The text was short. Need to swap Saturday long ride. Work mess. We'll explain later. That was the first skipped session. Then came another. When I did see her, she was still Maya on the surface. Fast, sharp, making jokes at my expense in the parking lot after a midweek run. But the timing was off. Her attention kept breaking. She checked her phone, went quiet at odd moments, changed subjects too quickly. 3 days later, I found out why. We were at the race expo downtown, picking up route maps and arguing about transition strategy, when a man in a fitted polo walked up beside her like he belonged there. He was good-looking in the polished way some men stay good-looking because they practice it. Expensive smile. Easy posture. The kind of guy who looked relaxed because he expected rooms to tilt toward him. Maya, he said, like the name had muscle memory. Everything in her face tightened by 1 degree. Julian. He glanced at me, then back at her. Didn't know you were working this event too. I'm not working it, she said. I'm racing. That seemed to interest him. Then he looked at my badge and gave me a friendly nod that landed wrong instantly. Tom, I said. Julian. We know a lot of the same people. I believed that. I also believed he had shown up on purpose. He started talking about sponsor logistics, some paperwork issue, some shared contact from her old club network. The words were normal. The effect on her wasn't. I could see it happening in real time. Not fear exactly. Something older and more irritating than that. A drag on her focus. Like he knew where the weak hinges were and liked touching them. When he walked away, I said, that him? She kept looking at the floor map pinned to the table. Yes. He seems pleased with himself. He usually is. I waited. She exhaled. He has a way of showing up through practical things. Messages that could have been emails. Questions that don't need answers. He never asks for much. Just enough to get back in my head. What does he want? Her laugh had no humor in it. To remain relevant. That should have been a moment where I said exactly the right thing. Instead I said, then don't let him. She turned to me so fast I knew I had missed. Oh, perfect, she said quietly. Amazing. Why didn't I think of that? Maya, I didn't mean. I know what you meant. But she was already gone somewhere else inside herself. After that, our rhythm broke in little ugly pieces. She canceled the Saturday ride. I did a hard trail run alone and pushed too fast on a downhill section because anger is stupid fuel. My left knee gave me a sharp warning halfway back to town. Not a collapse, not a disaster, just a hot, deep pain that made every step home feel older than I wanted. I told nobody. That lasted 4 days. Then Maya saw me getting out of my truck after a grocery run and said, "Why are you limping?" "I'm not. You are very bad at lying for a grown man." "It's fine." She stared at me. That answer should be printed on the official flag of male decline. I wanted to laugh. Instead I said, "It's just irritated." She folded her arms. "How long?" "Few days." Her face changed. Not soft. Hurt. "So while I was dealing with my mess, you decided to have your own and tell me nothing." "That's not fair." "No," she said, "because it feels familiar from here." That landed exactly where it was aimed. We argued in the street like two idiots beside my driveway. Not loud enough for a scene, but sharp enough that both of us knew we were cutting at old scars, not current facts. She said I disappear behind control the second something matters. I said she vanishes the second the past knocks on the door. She said at least she knows she's scared. I said I was not scared. She looked at me for a long second. That's the one part one don't believe. Then she walked inside. The next week got worse. She missed our open water session. I showed up at the courts one evening and found out from somebody else that she had driven to the event town early to deal with sponsor issues. She never told me. I told myself I didn't care. That lie held for maybe 6 minutes. Emma called that night, and I made the mistake of sounding normal. "You fought with her," she said immediately. "How do you know that?" "Because you're using your tax voice." "My what?" "The voice you use when you're pretending this is administrative." I sat down on the edge of the bed and rubbed my knee. Emma got quiet for a second. "Dad." "What?" "You can still back out, you know. But if you do, don't call it maturity. Call it fear and save everyone time." That one stayed with me. 2 mornings later, I woke before dawn, loaded my bike, my run bag, the knee brace I hated, and drove straight to the coast without texting her first. If she was going to disappear into old patterns and I was going to lock myself inside mine, then one of us had to do something dumber and braver. By noon, I was standing in the rain outside registration in the event town, scanning the crowd for a black visor and a woman who moved like she refused to lose ground to life twice. I found her near the far end of the registration lot, standing beside a folding table with a clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other, talking to a volunteer like she was holding herself together by professional reflex. She looked up, saw me, and froze. For 1 second, neither of us moved. Rain tapped on the tent roof. People crossed between us with gear bags and bike helmets and that nervous event day energy. Then her eyes dropped to the knee brace sticking out of my duffel. "You drove here like that?" she asked. "You drove here without telling me." She let out a breath through her nose. "That isn't an answer." "It's the only one I had on the drive." The volunteer backed away smartly. Maya set down the clipboard. "You shouldn't be here if the knee is bad." "It isn't bad. That limp says otherwise." I stepped closer. "And the fact that you vanished says a few things too." Her face did that tight, controlled thing again, but it didn't hold. She looked tired. Not weak. Just worn thin in a place she hated showing. "Julian got himself attached to one of the sponsor groups," she said. "There was paperwork, calls, event access, all this small, ugly nonsense. I kept thinking I'd handle it, then tell you when it was done." That sounds a lot like my version of not saying things. She looked at me for a long moment and gave one short nod. "Yeah." Before either of us could say more, a voice came from behind us. "Maya, they need the final waiver initials." "Julian." "Of course." He walked up with the same polished calm, took in the scene, the duffel, the rain, me, and smiled like he'd arrived at exactly the right moment to be useful. She turned before I could speak. No, they need them from legal, not me. I told you that yesterday. He gave a little shrug. Just trying to help. No, she said, sharper now, loud enough that the nearest volunteer definitely heard it. You're trying to stay involved. Those are not the same thing. That wiped the smile off him. She kept going. You do not need to manage my work, my schedule, my race weekend, or my mood. We are done. Not dramatically. Not temporarily. Done. So stop finding clever reasons to appear. There it was. Clean, public, final. Julian glanced at me, maybe looking for support, maybe looking for an opening. He found neither. He muttered something about being misunderstood and walked off into the crowd. Maya watched him go, then laughed once in disbelief. I've been wanting to say that for about 3 years. Good timing, I said. She looked back at my bag. Now your turn. How bad? I told her the truth. Not ruined. Not great. Manageable if I was smart, which was unfortunate because being smart was not the mood of the weekend. By late afternoon, the whole event town was buzzing. Teams everywhere, bikes racked, route boards crowded, announcers making everything sound more glorious than it was. Emma had driven down too, because apparently my private life had become spectator sport. She hugged me, then looked at Maya and grinned. Okay, so this is the woman who turned my father back into a person. Maya laughed, the real kind this time. I had to use aggressive methods. Obviously, Emma said, eyeing the brace. Please keep him from doing heroic nonsense. No promises, Maya said. The start the next morning was chaos in the best way. Cold air, floodlights, coffee, nervous trash talk, bodies pretending not to feel age or weather or doubt. We got through the opening trail section well, not leading but close, moving like we actually belonged there. She climbed beautifully. I handled the descent better. At the first transition, we barely needed words. Then came the bike leg, and around mile 22 my knees sent up a bright, ugly signal on a steep standing section. I sat back down hard on the saddle. Maya looked over immediately. Talk. Still here. That's not what I asked. Pain's up. She nodded once. Then we changed the plan. We did. Less ego, smarter pacing, tighter corners. No stupid surges just because some 50-year-old man in expensive sunglasses wanted to prove he still had a soul. We lost places, then gained some back on the rolling section. By the time we hit the final trail climb, heat had come up off the rocks and the whole field looked cooked. That was where it went wrong. A team ahead of us missed a marker and cut onto the wrong ridge spur. One of them slipped trying to scramble back and went down hard enough that people started shouting. Instantly the race stopped matching in the old way. Maya looked at me. I looked at her. No discussion needed. We went over. The injured woman was conscious, scraped up, ankle already swelling. Her partner was panicking and not helping. Maya took charge fast, calm and clipped, getting water into the woman, stabilizing the leg, sending somebody up trail for course staff. I stayed with them, used my pack as support, gave up the wrap from my own knee kit without thinking twice. By the time officials got there, our shot at a podium was gone. Totally gone. Winning isn't everything, but losing that shot stung. Would you have stopped to help a stranger, or would you have kept your eyes on the prize? Tell me in the comments. What's your rule for moments like this? We both knew it. We also both knew neither of us regretted it. The marshal asked if we still wanted to continue once the woman was secured and transport was on the way. I looked at Maya. Sweat, dirt, scraped shin, stubborn eyes. You staying? I asked. She gave me that same look from the first climb in town. You kidding? I didn't come this far to get noble and quit. So we kept going. The final ascent was brutal. No glory left in it. Just effort, rhythm, breath, choice. My knee hurt. Her shoulders were tiring. We were hours past the version of the day where pride was enough. And weirdly, that made it better. Cleaner. At the last switchback, I slowed for half a second, and she reached back without even looking. Come on, she said. Don't get sentimental on me now. I took her hand, let her pull once, then moved beside her. We crossed nowhere near first place. Didn't matter. Emma was at the finish yelling like we had won the whole thing. Volunteers clapped. Somebody handed us medals that felt almost funny after everything else. Maya bent forward, hands on thighs, laughing and trying to breathe. I put a hand on the back of her neck. She looked up at me, flushed and wrecked and more beautiful than anybody had a right to be after a day like that. We're terrible at keeping things casual, she said. Yeah, I said. I'm starting to see that. A month later, the medals were hanging from a hook by my garage workbench under a new race flyer she had taped there without asking. Emma texted me photos of carbon wheels for your midlife athletic spiral. Maya still stole my route, my pace, half my breakfast, and most of my excuses. Some mornings we ran at dawn. Some mornings we rode out past the lake before the town was awake. Sometimes we argued all the way up a climb and kissed at the top like that was a completely normal way for two grown adults to live. Maybe it was. The point was, we had stopped acting like life was something to manage until it got quiet enough to endure. We had another event on the calendar, a road trip planned, and one more ridiculous start time waiting for us before sunrise. That morning, when she knocked on my door in the dark and called,